Hello everybody, welcome back to my survival shenanigans, where today we start off by doing the interior for the alchemist's house or the alchemist's shop or just the alchemist, so let's just call it that. Now, I talked about this a little bit previously, so at the bottom floor we're gonna have the shop floor where people can go and they can buy stuff and they can talk to the alchemist and order stuff and stuff like that, so I made it look like just like a normal shop floor with a counter. On the second floor is where the alchemist does all of his alchemy, and this is why there are no windows around here, just like I talked about last time, because he doesn't want people to see how he's doing it so they can't figure out how to do it themselves. Now, originally I wanted to have an auto brewer on this floor, but in the end I didn't do it. I just plopped down some brewing stands and I scattered the ingredients in different chests, because when I looked them up it seemed like it was a bit excessive for someone that uses potions as little as me, because the only potions I use are night vision when I'm working underwater, fire resistance when I'm working close to lava, and maybe a regen potion if I want to fight the wither. And all three of these things combined don't really happen more often than like twice a month. So I felt it was a bit unnecessary to have like a crazy auto brewer that can brew a ton of potions that I will basically never use. So it would have definitely been funny, as someone pointed out in the comments, to have basically an alchemist that doesn't know how to do alchemy and just has a fancy auto brewer with a book on how to use it, and that's how he does all of his stuff. That was a fantastic comment. I love that one. That was pretty funny. But unfortunately, no, he does actually brew his potions by himself. Now, with this building, especially with the shop floor at the very bottom, I didn't really care about what it looks like from the outside. I did try to add some color in there, once again with some bookshelves, which are just like cheating for interior decorating. But I was far more interested in what it looked like from the inside, and it actually ended up looking pretty decent from the outside as well. I particularly like the big, wide open windows, where we essentially have like 1.5 blocks thanks to the walls, because you can really see a lot of the shop floor, which is really good for a shop. Now, another thing that I decided to change was the netherwort farm. Originally this was supposed to be in a basement underneath the building, but since we're not using an auto brewer, it doesn't need to be all that big. We only need a few bits of netherwort to brew a potion every now and then. So I did something that I haven't done with any of the other houses or buildings, and that's to add a garden with a bit of a twist. So here is sort of the lore explanation and how it all came to be with this garden. So people in general know that netherwort has some magical properties and it can be used in alchemy, but they don't want to grow it and can't grow it because of two issues. Number one, it requires soulfire to grow, and people just don't know how to create soulfire. And number two, it corrupts the ground around it, so they don't want to grow it because, well, it will corrupt the ground around it. Well, Mr. Alchemist over here knows how to create soulfire, and he doesn't really give a hoot about the corruption, because he knows that the corruption is also fueled by the soulfire, so it won't spread forever. So that's why he's growing it right there in the open outside of his house, or at least he used to, because you may have noticed me erecting a wall. Well, this wall didn't used to be there, he just used to grow it right next to his house, but people got freaked out by the netherwort and the corruption, so they tried to get rid of it, and he had to build a wall so that they can't. Now, this did get people angry in the beginning, but as people tend to do, they sort of mellowed out over time, and now they're just like, you know what, it's Bob, he grows netherwort, that's what he does, and the corruption, doesn't seem to spread very far. Now, if we quickly snap out of the imaginary land for a second here, my goal with this wall was to just make it cold and repulsive, just not nice, very spiky, very, well, as I've said, cold. And I also deliberately tried to not make it look like it fits too well, because, well, it was not there to begin with. It was something that was added later on. And that's kind of it for the alchemist's house, at least for the time being. Next, we're gonna be tackling something that I wanted to do for a few days now, but I wasn't necessarily sure where to do it. And that is to create some farmland. We need some fields, right? The kingdom needs food, and I also need food because I've been eating fish from the Guardian farm, and it's terrible. Don't eat fish in Minecraft. It's really bad. And every kingdom that has a crop field, of course, needs a windmill. But this isn't just an ordinary windmill, because the wood for the, what is it called? The rotor? The hub? The sail? I don't know, the spinny thing, right? The wood for this spinny thing was infused by the alchemist, allowing it to function at extreme efficiency, to a point where they can have one rotor facing in each direction and it still works, and it goes so fast and it's so efficient that this one windmill can take care of all the milling for the entire kingdom. Because each rotor is connected to its own mill, so it's essentially 4 windmills in one. Now, the main reason why I actually ended up going with a weird windmill idea to begin with is because I'm just not very good at building normal windmills. Whenever I try to make a normal looking windmill, they always end up looking weird. They're too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, the top looks weird, the bottom looks weird, the rotors look weird, something will always end up going wrong. So I was like, okay, what if I just start with a weird windmill, so I have a weird windmill to begin with, and then I crank it up to 11. So it's weird, but it's intentionally weird. Now when it comes to the rotor, I only had a very basic idea in mind. I had no idea how I was going to do the sails until much later on, and I of course had to use crimson wood, because that's what the infused wood is, right? The stuff that Alchemist made his house out of. Now I didn't want the rotors to be too big, because it would not make sense, right? Crimson infused wood, extreme efficiency, they don't have to be big, but it would also block like most of the building, which I didn't want. But I also didn't want them to be too small, because I think they would look silly with these like mini fans on top of this giant building. So as I've said, just the right size, right? They're not too big, they're not too small. As far as the materials go, I stuck pretty much exclusively outside of the crimson wood, of course, to stone bricks, spruce logs, and then dark oak details. So pretty much the standard kingdom block palette, right? I even made the roofs out of dark prismarine, with the roofs also being sort of this standard kingdom roof. Though some things were a bit different here. I went pretty heavy on the logs, so you can see there's just a lot of logs all over the place, and that's just for support. And I also carried the stone brick all the way through. I didn't do any like block blending, so it's not like stone brick at the bottom and then like stone with underside at the top. No, it's just stone brick all the way through. And that's partially because I'm not really gonna go close to this building too terribly often. It's more something to be seen from a distance, right? The whole sort of, oh look, there's a windmill over there kind of thing. But also because, well, I just wanted it to look really sturdy, so I kept adding supports all over the place, because I mean the building is pretty tall and it's also extremely top heavy. And it doesn't matter that it's a magical windmill, that has nothing to do with it, right? The magic is in the rotors. That's where the magic is, not in the building itself. The building has to be like structurally sound or it's just gonna fall apart. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It was looking a bit chaotic to begin with, but once I built the roofs, everything sort of fell into place. Next on the menu was to plan out the paths for the field, because if you think I'm gonna make a 9x9 wheat field, you are very, very wrong. We are gonna have a fairly sizable kingdom, so we're gonna need a sizable crop field. Though it's still not going to be anywhere near enough, but you know, I'm going to make it big enough to where it feels alright for Minecraft. I definitely didn't want to go sort of real life scale, because then it would just be thousands of blocks, because you need a lot of farmland to feed a single person in real life. Like, I think people tend to underestimate how much farmland you actually need for a single person. I think it's somewhere around like 13,000 square meters per person or something like that. Though that number might only be true if you're not eating anything else. I'm actually not sure. So yeah, I didn't want that, because that would be complete nonsense. I'd be doing nothing but building wheat fields for the next few years. But, you know, I wanted it to be big when compared to like normal Minecraft farms, you know, something you would find in a village or something. So in the end, I decided that I'm just gonna cover sort of the upper area around the windmill. That was basically my only guidance here. Now this time around, I didn't actually go with the standard sort of kingdom pathway that we've been using to connect everything together, and I instead went with just pure path blocks to make it look more muddy. Now I ended up doing a lot of paths here, and that was deliberate, because the new texture of wheat is very yellow, and it's actually nothing but yellow. So once you plant down a lot of it, it's just this yellow blob of blood, and I wanted to avoid that from the very start. So I decided to cut the field up into smaller sections by using the path. Now I do realize that the path we're using to cut through the yellow field is also kind of yellow, but it's darker, and it gets even darker as it transitions from the path block to the field. I also didn't want the path to stand out too much, right? I wanted to cut through the field, not to create a highlight in the field. And I once again, as I often do when I'm building stuff, severely underestimated the amount of stuff this was going to take, because I went in with a few stacks of seeds and I was like, you know what, this is probably fine, and I ran out before I even filled a third of the field. And that's why I had to do this in stages. In the beginning, I had a bunch of bone meal from the skeleton farm, but I eventually ran out, so I had to wait for the crops to grow. Also, one thing you may have noticed is that whenever there's a change in elevation, I leave one block on the edge on the upper section, and that's to later put some leaves and stuff in there to sort of cut up the field even more, so it's even less of a yellow blob of blood. Though it would probably make more sense to do it the other way around now that I think about that, and leave one block on the bottom section, because then then the field would be less likely to be trampled by animals and mobs and even me running around. Now, once I ran out of bone meal to continue growing the field with, I finally moved on to the sails, and I ended up doing a pretty basic design, I think, though I ended up using black wool, and I don't really know why, probably because it's just, you know, the base color for the kingdom, but I was also kind of like, you know, you always see white sails, or like yellowy sails, or beige sails. You never see black sails, and I think black sails would be cool, so I did black sails. Though I unfortunately didn't have enough wool to do all of them, so I only did 3, and I had to finish the third one with black wool, just to sort of get an idea of what the windmill was gonna look like once the sails were on. And I don't really have a good way of getting colored wool. I mean, I could just sit in the spider farm and then use ink sacs, but I would have to go to the squid farm, so I think our next project is gonna be a sheep farm, which is gonna be pretty easy to do because, well, we have a ton of wheat now. Now, I think adding in these black sails and then beefing up the wood a little bit by adding in some stairs and some trapdoors completely changed the look and the feel of the windmill. I like it a lot more now. But if you guys really don't like it and you have a better idea in mind, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. I personally think they turned out great, and I think I've nailed the right size for them. They're just big enough to obstruct portions of the building, to remove some of the clutter from like the supports and stuff, but they're not too big to overshadow the building. Plus, it introduces more black into the kingdom, which is something I definitely want to do, because currently the official colors of the kingdom, which are black and red, look kind of out of place, which is a bit weird, because up until now they were just on the banners, which I haven't put too many up, and on the balloon, which was looking really out of place. But now we have more black over here, we have some reddish colors at the alchemist house, so it's definitely getting better. But anyway, while I was building the sails, a lot of the wheat has grown, so I was able to continue spreading the field. Now, I really didn't know how big I was gonna make it, because once again, my only guidance for this was basically I'm just gonna cover the upper sections around the mill, so I really didn't know how far I wanted to stretch it, but I ended up stretching it quite far, and it has already provided me with so much wheat, I will probably not have to harvest this for like a month. Now at this point I was a bit unhappy with how bland it was all looking as the wheat started to grow. It was just a lot of yellow, which I didn't want, so I went back, I picked up some birch leaves and I spread them on that one block around each section to sort of cut it up a little bit more, and I think it helped quite a bit. And I ended up using birch instead of oak, which is what I normally use for bushes throughout the kingdom, outside of the forest that is, because I just wanted a brighter bush in there. I didn't want like vibrant green stuff to just completely stand out in the field. But I still felt like that was not enough, so I picked up a bunch of random stuff like fences and lanterns and barrels and like composters and all that kind of stuff, hay bales, and I spread it all throughout to create some like mild highlights, not something that stands out too much, but just something to grab your attention as you're looking into the golden field once it's fully grown. Something that has a bit of a different texture and color, and it maybe even pokes up above the wheat. And I think that's what I was missing here. This really sort of like provided some nice detailing, and it also made it feel quite Minecrafty with the hay bales and the composters and all that kind of stuff. And that was unfortunately all the time I had to record this episode. Man, I always feel like I don't do enough in these videos, but I mean, we did the interior for the alchemist, we did a garden for the alchemist, we built a windmill, and we made a field and also decorated the field, so I'm pretty happy with our progress today. So as always guys, I thank you very much for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.